Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, but maybe today I should say ranting about politics. Because for the last few years, British politics, has to be said, has been quite embarrassing. But at times it can also be quite disgusting, and today it has absolutely crossed that line into every facet of it is just disgusting me. The situation in Parliament, basically, and the media, quite frankly, is now becoming increasingly ugly. After an extremely rude outburst from the Leader of the House, Andrea Leadsom, who had the nerve to call the Speaker of the House discourteous last night, when his action was actually extremely helpful to the government, was just another insult. But she is a singularly unpleasant woman, it has to be said. Reportedly giving her own cabinet colleagues today the rough end of her petulant tongue. Now, it's been reported that Theresa May will force through her third meaningful vote in spite of the Speaker's ruling. But then those same reports say that she'll do so by changing the motion to reflect that which would be needed to get the DUP support, or bring in the extension, if she obtains it, into the equation. But this is what's so disingenuous about the process. If she makes changes to her motion along those lines, then it wouldn't be in defiance of the Speaker's ruling. The Speaker never at any time said that she couldn't have a third vote on her deal. He said that she couldn't present the same motion without substantial changes. And as we've already seen with the second vote, those changes don't have to be that far-reaching. I would argue there was no change at all to her deal at the time, second time round, but the motion was different, and so the Speaker allowed it. And the Speaker, by giving his statement yesterday, not only helped the government understand what they'd need to do to be able to push the motion, but he also explained it to them in plenty of time to come up with a difference to that motion. Now, the media were full of the expected bile towards the Speaker for simply reading out a convention which has existed and been used for centuries. And, as he said himself, if Parliament wants to change that convention, it absolutely can do. All it needs to do is to vote to do it. But guess what? They don't want to change it. Naturally, the most vicious treatment came from not unexpected sources. The Sun, a newspaper that has been all but banned in the city of Liverpool, for example, because of their vile and villainous practices, and the Daily Mail, who earlier described senior judges as enemies of the people for making the government comply with UK law. And we have to remember that this is a Speaker who has allowed contentious motions which began the whole Brexit process in the first place. That's quickly forgotten by the Brexiteers. He's also a fairly right-wing Conservative MP, and so as impartial as his office is, and he has proven to be, he's much more in line with government than the opposition. So if he were minded to be biased, it's far more likely he'd be on the side of the government. Now, as to May's proposals, I'd argue that a motion that calls for a third vote on her deal in conjunction with an amendment to the European Union Withdrawal Act, in line with, as I say, an agreed extension with the EU if she can get it, would indeed mean that the motion would be substantially different and there'd be no problems. She was going to have to do one of those two things anyway, so I don't see what all the ranting and raving towards the Speaker's about. To me, it just smacks of control. Here we have a Prime Minister who thinks that just because she holds that office, she's somehow in charge. But authority is never really given. You have to enforce it. She has no authority over any part of this process. She has no authority over Parliament. She has no authority over her parliamentary party. She doesn't even have authority over her own cabinet, and this is made up of MPs which are appointed by her. She doesn't have to confer with anyone. And in sheer frustration at her own lack of authority, she kicks in the only direction she can. She can rant about the opposition, but ranting about the opposition is par for the course at the best of times. She daren't kick out against her own party or cabinet because she's too weak. So she picks on the one person who has to remain polite and impartial, taking the unwarranted attacks with good humour and dignity. And both the Prime Minister as well as the cabinet ministers and journalists supporting her are making the UK look like a cesspool where morality is drowning and is now near death. They have absolutely no regard for truth or justice. They have no consideration for how their viperous behaviour is making the country look. And they have no shred of shame to the way they are quite deliberately tearing the country apart, spreading malicious lies about someone who is doing their job to the best of their ability. Some say that the current speaker is a very interventionist one, and that previous speakers have not interjected as he has. Well, that may be true, but consider the time he has spent in office. He was elected Speaker of the House of Commons in summer of 2009, 1 year before we began a run of weak minority governments. He's had to preside over a coalition government run by Dumb and Dumber, then a small minority government that threw the country into chaos with a shambles of a referendum campaign on Brexit. Then we had a government led by a Prime Minister who decided to piss away her inherited slender majority in an ill-advised general election and lose it completely. Throughout all this, the government is trying to achieve something that has never been done in human history, for which there is no precedent, and without any realistic aims or objectives. Quite frankly, Parliament has not been designed to cope with this. To go alongside that, we have a House of Commons who have no idea how to proceed. Too used to being told which door to walk through by their party leaderships, MPs didn't know what to do once their party leaders lost their heads. Quite frankly, has there ever been a speaker who has had to face up to these challenges? Of course he's intervened more than previous speakers. No other speakers had to be called to do so like this. At least not in recent history. Some medieval speakers were beheaded for annoying the wrong people. At least that won't happen to him. And then let's consider the situation that has caused this explosion of venom from the government. Wanting to put forward a vote on a deal that's already been heavily rejected twice. Historically heavily rejected. A deal that is not going to be changed in any way. A deal that, even at this late stage, there is still not a majority in Parliament. Quite frankly, Theresa May could bring this up for a vote on the 28th of March, which is the last sitting day of Parliament before Brexit, and it still wouldn't pass. More than enough Conservative MPs, whom I believe want a no deal, are on the record as saying that they will not vote for it, even with DUP support. And that outcome is looking unlikely. After 5 days now of negotiations, the Conservatives at the time I'm doing this still do not have their support, even though you've got both the Attorney General and the Chancellor offering legal and financial inducements to do so, let's face it, bribes and lies. So they're basically venting fire and fury for being given a hard time over a third meaningless vote when they don't even have the numbers to get it passed. It's just the latest in a long line of MPs blaming someone else for what is an inevitable outcome. She would love to pretend that the reason her deal isn't passed is because someone blocked her in Parliament. But Theresa May has been blocking Parliament for months now, and the fault is all hers. But I don't console myself with knowing that history will come to that obvious conclusion when calmer eyes look at the future. That does us no good in the present. And I can even see how this is going to play out. Theresa May will seek an extension at the summit this weekend on the basis that she's going to put it up for a vote again next week. I can just imagine the face palms that are going to ensue there. She'll bring back her vote, the deal for a vote next week. It'll be allowed because she'll change the motion in the way she had to anyway. She will claim that she dared the Speaker to block it. And newspapers will say that, and that she exerted authority on the Speaker, who then allows it. And it'll work, because all of the reports are of him blocking a third vote on the deal, which is completely untrue. So if there's a third vote, and it was reported that the Speaker blocked a third vote, well, how can then people come to any conclusion other than the Speaker was defeated in his villainous deeds? And it's because of this sort of behaviour that the country is so divided. If people would at least tell the truth, then the facts could be clear to everyone and the discussion of opinion would be more convivial. It's the divisive nature of the so-called debate being poisonous. You have half the population who do check facts from reliable sources, knowing one thing, and the other half getting their facts from disreputable sources, thinking they know another. And because the facts, as stated, are completely at odds, each side thinks the other is lying. And lying is a terrible thing to do to your friends and family. Most people are calm enough to agree to disagree on a matter of opinion. But when someone has their facts wrong, well, for the majority that's quite infuriating and you can't really accept it. And that's why friendships are ending, families are breaking up, and even dating's affected. Gone are the days when you go, what's your sign then? Now it's leave or remain. I've seen endless reports of people saying that their family disowned them for supporting Remain when the rest of them are pro-leave. And this is why, no matter how this ends, this country is fundamentally divided. And it's no longer divided along the historical borderlines of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. That's just childish nonsense now. Even though, of course, it's going to come back, the very fabric of the nation is fractured around this issue. And far from attempting to heal those divisions, our politicians and media are sticking their fingers into the wounds and deliberately making it worse. And it is deliberate. It goes beyond simply presenting a misleading argument to get your way. That's to be expected in political discourse. We're not even talking about a situation where this division of the nation is an unintended side effect of a primary issue. The division is deliberate. It's intended to stoke passions and whip up a frenzy of hatred against a perceived enemy in order to draw attention away from their own cruel incompetence. And that enemy is no longer simply the evil EU empire or immigrants propping up our communities and economies. No, they're no longer satisfied with that. Now the enemy is the UK Parliament that Brexiteers keep saying they want to make our laws and then moan at them when they do. The enemy are judges who enforce sovereignty in our courts. The enemy are also British citizens who happen to like being in the EU. The enemy is your brother, sister, mother, father. Your enemy is everyone except for the real enemy. The disaster capitalists profiting from our self-inflicted doom and the media licking at our wounds for sustenance. Someone said in the comments yesterday that they didn't know how I could discuss some of these things without swearing. Well, let me tell you, if you could read my mind, the air would turn blue. This willful and cowardly behaviour makes me absolutely sick. So far, the behaviour has been embarrassing to the country. This is making us look like epic dicks. The Speaker was supported around the House when he gave his statement. There were gasps, but there were also plenty of supportive hears. No objections shouted out at all. And the House of Commons is not shy about shouting out objections. The government had a few toadies on the backbenches and themselves are all that exists of the Commons in terms of dissatisfaction. And even those toady backbenchers were simply querying whether or not the Speaker should have given the government advance notice of what he was going to say, which of course he has no obligation to do so. They weren't even having the nerve to suggest that what he said was wrong, because how could it be? He was reading from accepted convention. But where are those MPs now that were all supporting him yesterday? I know some parts of the media would never publish it, but I see nothing at all written about the outpouring of support from the Speaker today. Why isn't Parliament coming together as one to show just how much the minority the government is in the House of Parliament against the champion of all MPs? I do hope someone in the Commons at some point before today's proceedings ends raises a point of order on this matter at the very least.
If the government wishes to bring forward a new proposition that is neither the same nor substantially the same as that disposed of by the House on the 12th of March, this would be entirely in order. What the government cannot legitimately do is to resubmit to the House the same proposition or substantially the same proposition as that of last week, which was rejected by 149 votes.